Good evening, everyone. My speech tonight is about in praise of an individual. And tonight I'm speaking in praise of my Uncle George. You may recall I toasted him actually. Toasted him a few weeks ago. And when it came up that this speech was about praising somebody, I really couldn't think of anybody else. So I'm staying with Uncle George for the praise. What I'd like to do tonight is to give you 3 glimpses into his life. That's his early life during the time of World War II. I'll be showing you a photograph. I'll also be showing you a document from World War II. There's an episode around the pub, and there's also another story that he told of the cake competition, which is actually a little bit lighter in terms of content. So this is my Uncle George. He's the gentleman nearest to me on this side, on your left. I wasn't able to find a picture of him when he was in the Merchant Navy, which was 5 or 6 years earlier. I have pictures of all his other shipmates, but he hasn't. I think he was taking the camera, the picture himself, so he wasn't in any of the shots. You know, he had the camera sort of thing. So that's my uncle there on the left, and with him there is his brother. His brother's name was Harry, and they both went through the war together. This, I'm not sure, oh yeah, it's not too bad. This is called The Liberation of Europe Account of Wages, and I found this in his apartment when he passed on recently. So this goes right the way back till, it says here, September 1944, which is an amazing document to have from all those years. And what's interesting about it is that he was paid, for 7 weeks' work, he was paid £30, that's roughly $60. And then he had war risk money and consolidated rate, in other words, danger pay, because he was in a dangerous occupation. And that was £23 extra, so he almost doubled his money by actually being in a place where he could lose his life at any minute. And the other thing I found really interesting about that, so there's all that drama at the top there, and then when you look down the bottom, he still had to pay taxes, pension fund, and unemployment insurance, so all those things still apply, even if you're a hero, you know, with the country. So, one of my first stories is about, it took place down the pub, and as Uncle was called up, he was 17 years old, and his dad took him to one side before he went off on his first journey, and he said, "Now lad," he said, "I've got 3 things to say to you." He said, "Always drink grapefruit," in other words, don't drink any alcohol, "don't take up smoking, and if you meet any women, find out first if they're good or bad, and don't disgrace the family." And the white feather I'll get to in a minute. So, Uncle went away to sea, then he came back about 6 or 7 weeks later, and he took his dad down to the pub. And so his dad goes into the pub and orders him a drink. He says, "I'll have a grapefruit juice, please, for my son George." And Uncle says, "No, bartender, you're not going to have the grapefruit juice, I'm going to have the pint of beer today." So instead of the grapefruit juice, Uncle had the pint of beer. He then got out some cigarettes and started smoking, at which point his dad said to him, "Well, I gave you 3 things not to do," he said, "when you left." He said, "So far, you're not staying with the grapefruit juice, you started smoking. Now, tell me about the women, were they good or bad?" And Uncle said, "Well, I can't tell you, Dad," he said. "I did meet some women," he said, "but I really couldn't tell whether they were good or bad women." And then they both laughed. What happened immediately after this, they were in the same pub, and this elderly lady came up to Uncle, and he felt her put something in his pocket. When he looked down, it was a white envelope, and inside there was a white feather. Now, especially during the Second World War, a white feather meant you were a coward, so it was a real insult. So he said to this woman, "Why are you putting a white feather in my pocket?" Well, she said, "Because you're in civilian clothing, so obviously you haven't actually signed up for to join any of the armed forces, so you're not really helping our country in terms of its, winning the war." And so he said, "But I've just come back off the Atlantic convoy. We had a terrible time, it was a really bad run, there were lots of U-boat submarines, and I lost some good friends, and also we lost 2 or 3 ships in that convoy as well." And she said, "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, I didn't realise that you were in the Merchant Navy." And she said, "I just came up to say that because I've just lost 2 sons of my own, and both those sons were really dear to me, and basically she was angry because she actually had lost her sons, whereas Uncle was still there." And these are all true stories, by the way, that happened to him. Next on to the cake competition, which is a somewhat lighter thing. When Uncle was in port in the US, whenever they poured into the ports, there used to be ladies' clubs who used to knit gloves and scarves, and they used to put really cute notes inside the knitted items, which will say, to keep you safe and warm at sea. So they took an active interest in the soldiers from England, because they felt really that they were heroes, because they were fighting eventually to try and protect the US as well, so Europe wouldn't fall. So basically he went to this cake competition, and there were these ladies there who were in their like elderly ladies, and they were asked to choose the best cake, and they weren't sure how to choose the best cake. It was a group of about 10 or 15 of them. And they're all young men, these. They're just like 17 and 18-year-olds, right? Because they're really young when they sign up. And so they had no idea whether to choose this cake or that cake, no idea at all. But what they did in the end, they just decided, they got together, decided they're just going to give it to the oldest person in the club, which they did, which turned out to be the most experienced lady, and so everybody was happy. So, to summarise, as time's nearly up here, I've shown you a photograph and a document from World War II. I told you the story of the pub, and also about the cakes as well, the cake competition. And I want to finish with a quote, and this quote is actually directly from Uncle's journals. And he said, the real heroes are the ones that didn't come back, God rest their souls. And it's by George W. Green, who's an ex-Merchant Navy person. Thank you.